You are walking across a wide plain in East Africa. The sun has barely risen. The grass is wet. The air smells like dust, heat, and rain that has not arrived yet. And every step you take presses your bare feet into the cold ground. No boots, no socks, no soft foam sole, no expensive running shoe designed by a team of people in a modern office. Just skin. Skin against dirt. Skin against stone. Skin against thorns. Skin against a planet that has been trying to cut, bruise, and punish feet for millions of years. And here's the strange part. It does not hurt. Because your feet, in that ancient world, are not the soft, protected things most people have today. They are armor. They are tools. They are living technology. They are the result of countless ancestors who walked, ran, hunted, escaped, migrated, crossed deserts, crossed forests, crossed mountains, and did nearly all of it with nothing between their bodies and the earth. So here's the question almost nobody asks. Why did humans spend nearly all of our existence barefoot? For most of human history, there were no shoes, no sandals, no moccasins, no bark tied with vines, nothing. The easy answer is to say ancient people were primitive. They simply had not invented shoes yet. They were suffering, bleeding, limping across the landscape, waiting for one clever person to finally wrap something around a foot. But that is not what happened. Ancient humans did not go barefoot because they were too simple to make shoes. They went barefoot because, for most of our history, they did not need shoes. Their bodies already were the shoe. And the moment that finally changed, the moment someone first decided to protect their feet with something artificial, is surprisingly recent in the human story. So recent that shoes are younger than many things we think of as ancient. Younger than dogs, younger than cave art, possibly younger than some of the first symbolic objects humans made. Think about that. Humans were making art before we were making sandals. To understand why, you have to start with the foot itself. Because the human foot is not just a flat thing at the end of your leg. It is one of the strangest and most overbuilt structures in your entire body. Each foot has 26 bones, 33 joints, more than 100 muscles, tendons, and ligaments, all packed into something smaller than a book. About a quarter of all the bones in your body are below your ankles. In a very literal way, a huge part of your skeleton is foot. And the most important feature is the arch. That curved shape on the inside of your foot may look simple, but it is not decoration. It is a spring. When your foot hits the ground, the arch flattens slightly and stores energy. Then, when you push forward, it rebounds and helps launch you into the next step. Every stride becomes more efficient. Every walk becomes less wasteful. Every run becomes less punishing. No other primate has a foot quite like ours. A chimpanzee foot is closer to a hand. Flexible, grippy, useful for climbing trees, terrible for walking long distances across open land. The human foot is different. It is built for distance. Long, exhausting, endless distance. And it was built to do that barefoot. But a foot that touches the ground every day needs protection. So evolution gave us something most modern people treat like a problem. Callus. Today, a callus is something many people scrub off, file down, or pay someone to remove. It looks rough. It feels ugly. It seems like damage. But for most of human history, callus was not damage. It was equipment. It was the natural soul of the human body. Researchers studying people who walk barefoot regularly have found something fascinating. Barefoot walkers develop thick, hardened skin on the soles of their feet. That part is obvious. But the surprising part is that this thick skin does not seem to destroy their ability to feel the ground. The foot is still sensitive. It can still detect pressure, texture, vibration, small changes in the surface below. So, a natural callus does two things at once. It protects the foot from rough ground, heat, small stones, and sharp edges. But it also keeps the foot connected to the world. That is incredibly important. Because your foot is not just there to carry you, it is constantly sending information to your brain. Is the ground soft? Is it slippery? Is that stone stable? Should your ankle adjust? Should your toes grip? Your foot is reading the ground with every step. A modern shoe protects you, but it also blocks much of that information. It gives you safety, but it takes away sensation. Your foot becomes insulated from the world. Ancient feet were different. They were tough, but not numb. Protected, but still aware. So our ancestors were not walking around helplessly crying over every pebble. Their souls had adapted over years of movement. Their feet had grown into the terrain. In a very real sense, they were already wearing shoes, shoes made from themselves. And this is the part that breaks the modern imagination. Barefoot was not the weak state. Barefoot was the optimized state. Now let us talk about running, because this is where the human body starts to look almost ridiculous. Humans are not the fastest animals. A horse can outrun you. A deer can outrun you. A dog can outrun you. Even a squirrel could embarrass you over a short distance. But over long distances, especially in heat, humans are terrifying. We are endurance machines. Our bodies can sweat. Our legs can keep moving. Our arches store energy. Our tendons act like springs. And our breathing is not locked to our stride in the same way as many four-legged animals. That means humans can keep going. And going. And going. Some human groups used a hunting method called persistence hunting. The idea is simple and brutal. You chase an animal during the heat of the day. The animal runs away faster than you. Then it stops. You keep following. It runs again. You keep following. Again and again until the animal overheats and collapses. It sounds impossible, but it works because humans are not built only for speed. We are built for distance. We are the slow nightmare that does not stop coming. And for most of that story, we ran without shoes. Studies comparing barefoot runners in modern cushioned shoes show an important difference. When many people wear thick running shoes, they often land hard on the heel. The padded heel makes it feel safe. But the impact can send a sharp force up the leg. Barefoot runners often land more on the midfoot or forefoot. That lets the arch, calf, and tendons absorb force more naturally. The body becomes its own suspension system. In other words, the barefoot running style humans used for countless generations may have been gentler in some ways than the modern style created by protective footwear. That is the absurdity of history. We invented technology to protect ourselves from a problem our own bodies had already learned how to solve. So now the mystery becomes even bigger. If the barefoot human foot was so effective, if it was armored, sensitive, springy, and built for long-distance movement, then why did anyone invent shoes at all? What changed? To answer that, we need to ask when shoes appeared. And that is where the story gets difficult. Because shoes almost never survive. Stone tools survive. Bones survive. Teeth survive. But shoes? Leather rots. Plant fibers decay. Grass falls apart. Bark breaks down. Hide disappears back into the earth. Most early footwear would have been made from exactly the kinds of materials that vanish. So, for most of prehistory, we do not have shoes. Not necessarily because no one wore them, but because the evidence has disappeared. Archaeology has a warning for this kind of problem. Absence of evidence is not always evidence of absence. Just because we have not found a very ancient shoe does not mean one never existed. So researchers had to become clever. If the shoes themselves disappeared, maybe the body remembered them. Maybe bones carried the clue. This is where the story turns to paleoanthropologist Eric Trinkus. He asked a simple but brilliant question. What does wearing shoes do to the foot over time? When you walk barefoot, your toes work hard. They flex, they grip, they push against the ground. They help balance the body, they help drive movement. All that work strengthens the toe bones, just like repeated stress can make other bones stronger. But when you wear supportive footwear, the shoe takes over some of that work. Your toes do not need to grip as much. They do not need to push off in the same way. They can relax. And over many years, and possibly across many generations, the smaller toe bones can become less robust, more slender, more delicate. So Trinkus studied ancient human foot bones across long periods of time. He compared strong leg bones with the smaller toe bones. The leg bones told him people were still walking huge distances, but at a certain point, the smaller toes seemed to become thinner. That suggested something had changed. The people were still moving, still walking, still using their legs heavily, but their toes were not doing as much work as before. Something may have been protecting them. Something may have been supporting the foot, something like a shoe. His estimate placed the possible widespread use of supportive footwear around 40,000 years ago. Not based on a preserved shoe, but based on a footprint left inside the skeleton. A shoe you cannot hold. A shoe written into bone. Now, this is not the final answer carved into stone. Other researchers have debated it. Toe bones can change for different reasons. Science is careful because indirect evidence can be complicated. But the idea is powerful. Long before the oldest surviving shoes, our bones may show that something changed in how humans treated their feet. And if that is true, footwear may be far older than any shoe we have actually found. But to see a real ancient shoe, an object you could hold in your hands, we have to move much later in time, because only unusual environments preserve footwear. Very dry caves, frozen mountains, places sealed away from moisture, air, bacteria, and decay. That is where the oldest surviving shoes appear. One famous example comes from Fort Rock Cave in Oregon. There, archaeologists found sandals woven from sagebrush bark. They were not crude scraps. They were carefully made, twisted, woven, designed by people who understood the material. Radiocarbon dating showed that some of these sandals were roughly 9 to 10,000 years old. That is astonishing, but even more important is what their quality tells us. These were not likely the first sandals ever made. They were already refined, already skilled, already part of a tradition. That means the true beginning of sandals was probably older. We are only seeing the oldest examples lucky enough to survive. Then there is the oldest surviving leather shoe known today. It was found in Arini 1 cave in Armenia. In 2008, archaeologists uncovered a single shoe in remarkable condition. A right shoe, made from one piece of cowhide, cut to fit the foot, laced with a leather cord, stuffed with grass. It was around 5,500 years old, older than Stonehenge, older than the Great Pyramid. And yet when you look at it, it feels strangely familiar. Not like a mysterious alien object, but like something a person actually wore. Someone tied those laces. Someone put that shoe on before walking into a cold, rough world. Someone used grass inside it, perhaps for warmth, perhaps to hold its shape. Then somehow, by accident, preservation, and time, that ordinary object survived for thousands of years. A simple shoe outlived almost everything else about the person who wore it. History can be beautiful in that strange way. One small object remains when an entire life has vanished. And then there is Ötzi the Iceman. Ötzi died in the Alps around 3,200 BC. His body was frozen in ice for more than 5,000 years before hikers found him in 1991. And Ötzi was wearing shoes, not rough scraps, not random pieces of hide, actual cold-weather footwear. His shoes used bearskin for the soles, deer hide for the upper part, bark fiber netting, and grass packed inside for insulation. Basically, Stone Age mountain boots. They were designed for a brutal environment. Cold, rock, snow, ice. A barefoot person in that landscape would not last long. And that gives us the key to the whole mystery. Look at where the oldest surviving footwear comes from. Dry caves, deserts, cold mountains. Rocky highlands, frozen landscapes. Extreme places. Not the warm African environments where the human foot first evolved. That is the answer. For most of our story, human feet worked well because humans lived in places where barefoot movement made sense. Warm ground, natural terrain, a lifetime of callus, a foot built for distance. The system worked. A fish does not need a raincoat. And a tropical endurance primate did not need shoes on the landscape it evolved to cross. But then humans left. We moved out of Africa, we entered colder lands, sharper lands, drier lands, higher lands. We crossed snow, ice, rock, burning desert, frozen mud, ground that could injure, burn, or freeze a barefoot. Suddenly, the beautiful barefoot machine faced conditions it was never originally designed for. That is when the shoe became necessary. Not because the foot was weak, but because humans were ambitious. We kept walking into places our bodies had no business surviving. The shoe was not an upgrade for a broken foot. It was a passport, a piece of technology that allowed a warm climate animal to expand into the rest of the planet. Shoes were not the beginning of foot technology. The foot was already technology. The shoe was the beginning of human trespass. The moment we decided that even the landscapes trying to kill us were still places we might go. And that changes how you see the whole invention. Shoes are not just fashion. They are not just comfort. They are not just protection. They are evidence of human refusal. Refusal to stay where we evolved. Refusal to stop at the edge of ice, stone, desert, or mountain. Refusal to accept that the body's original design was the limit of the human world. But there is one more part of the story, because shoes and bones can take us back thousands of years.
Maybe tens of thousands, but footprints go much farther. Actual footprints pressed into mud, ash, sand, or ancient ground can preserve the movement of beings who lived millions of years ago. And when scientists study the oldest footprints left by our ancestors, they are not only looking for feet, they are looking for behavior, for posture, for movement, for the moment our lineage stood upright and began walking across the world. Those footprints are older than shoes, older than Homo sapiens, older than cities, language, tools, fire, and almost everything we recognize as human. They are the ghost trails of creatures who did not know they were beginning one of the greatest journeys in the history of life. A journey that started barefoot and eventually led to sandals, boots, sneakers, high heels, hiking shoes, and billion-dollar footwear brands. But beneath all of that, the old story is still there. The arch, the callus, the toes. The skin reading the ground, the ancient machine still hidden inside the modern shoe. So the next time you put on a pair of shoes, remember this. You are not covering a weak design. You are covering one of evolution's masterpieces. A foot built to cross continents. A foot that carried hunters across plains, families across deserts, children across riverbeds, and entire species into unknown worlds. For most of our existence, the earth touched us directly. And we touched it back. Then one day, somewhere in the deep past, a human looked at snow, stone, heat, or ice and made a decision. The ground was no longer going to decide where we could go.